I'm sharing this story on behalf of my parents because they're not tech savvy at all. I'm only 14, and while this happened to them, I was there for most of it and saw the aftermath firsthand. My parents had always dreamed of having a vacation home, somewhere peaceful they could escape to on weekends and holidays. After years of saving, they finally bought a small cottage about 2 hours away from our main house. It needed work, but my dad loves renovation projects and my mom was excited about having a garden. They both work stressful jobs in the city, so having this retreat meant everything to them. The cottage sits on a gentle slope with an amazing view of the valley below. When we first visited after closing the deal, we met our neighbors. On one side lived a friendly young couple who had just bought their first home. They brought us homemade cookies and offered to water our plants when we weren't around. On the other side was a house that we later found out was used as a party rental property. In our backyard stood three magnificent oak trees. My dad estimated they were at least 200 years old. The trees were massive, healthy, and created perfect privacy for the master bedroom and bathroom windows, which didn't have curtains installed yet. Since we were on a dip in the terrain, these trees blocked the view from the house across the way. Little did we know these trees would become the center of a neighborhood nightmare. We had to return to our main home after the first weekend because my mom needed to get back to work. Just 2 days later, my mom received a frantic call from the nice neighbor while she was at her office. The nice neighbor urgently told my mom that the people next door were on our property with chainsaws, and they didn't know what they were planning to do. When my mom asked if they could stop them, the nice neighbor apologized and explained that their ferry was about to leave and they needed to get to work. However, they offered to call the police since they knew all of them very well and would come quickly. My mom gratefully accepted the offer and said she would get my dad to catch the next ferry and get there as fast as possible. My dad picked me up from school that day and we drove straight to the cottage. By the time we arrived, the police had already come and gone. What we saw was devastating. The three ancient oaks were completely gone, leaving only jagged stumps. Pieces of our glass deck railing were shattered on the ground. We heard chainsaw noises from next door and walked over to investigate. There were three men in their mid-30s cutting up our trees for firewood. My dad approached them trying to keep his composure. He asked them why they had cut down our trees. The entitled neighbor casually replied that they had noticed the trees could potentially fall and damage our house. So as new neighbors, they thought they should do the neighborly thing of cutting them down for us. He described it as a gesture of new neighbors helping each other out. My dad pointed out that the trees were perfectly healthy. He added that they had trespassed and cut down our trees without our consent, and we would be calling the police. The entitled neighbor's face turned bright red. He became angry, exclaiming that they had improved our view and ensured the trees wouldn't damage our house. He couldn't understand why we would call the police when they had helped us. My dad hates being called dude. He considers it disrespectful. Being much bigger and stronger than these men, but not wanting to lose his temper in front of me, he simply turned and walked back toward our cottage. I stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. The oldest of the group, probably around 40, looked at me with an unsettling smile. He tried to bribe me by suggesting that if I stopped my dad from calling the police, they would give me an ice cream. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I just turned around and followed my dad inside without saying a word. A week later, we discovered the real reason behind their helpful act. The trees had been blocking their rental property's view of the sea. By cutting them down, they had significantly improved their vacation rental appeal and could charge higher rates. They hadn't been concerned about our safety at all. The police investigation concluded that they had intentionally trespassed and destroyed our property for their own financial gain. They were fined a substantial amount, sentenced to community service, and ordered to pay us enough money to install a privacy fence along the property line. We've recently learned that they've started renting out their property full-time rather than living there, probably to avoid facing us. My mom has planted new trees, but of course, they'll take decades to grow to the size of the ones we lost. The nice neighbors told us that the entitled neighbors also had a dog that regularly defecated on both our properties without them cleaning it up. The nice neighbors have volunteered to monitor the fence installation when we're not around to ensure the entitled ones don't try anything else. We're still working with the county on determining the exact boundary lines before we can build the fence. Unfortunately, local building codes limit fence height to 2.5 meters, which won't fully block their view. We'd need at least 5 meters for that, but it will at least give us some privacy and peace of mind. In the end, their entitlement cost them thousands in fines, legal fees, and fence construction, all for a slightly better view they could have simply asked permission for or offered to compensate us for. My parents now say they've learned an important lesson about installing security cameras first thing when buying property. I work at this Tex-Mex restaurant. You know, the one named after a smoke-dried jalapeno. I started right after finishing my first year of college, desperately needing money for textbooks and rent. Working the cash register during lunch rush is like being thrown into a whirlwind. Faces blur together, orders blend into one another, and my fingers fly across the touch screen faster than I can think. Most days, I can handle it. Most days. Last Tuesday started like any other shift. I arrived early, tied my apron, and braced myself for the inevitable flood of hungry office workers and construction crews from nearby sites. By noon, we were slammed, with a line snaking toward the door. My managers were busy handling online orders while I manned the front register, moving customers through as quickly as possible. Then, he walked in. The man was wearing a biker mask with only his eyes showing. In a normal setting, this might have been alarming, but after the pandemic, seeing masks wasn't unusual, though his particular style choice stood out. Still, I didn't think much of it as he approached the counter. I greeted him with our standard welcome and asked for his order. The man ordered a chicken meal and I rang it up efficiently, ready to move on to the next customer. Then he added that he wanted a Petron margarita as well. We do serve alcoholic beverages, so I nodded and added it to his order. Following our strict policy, I politely told him that I needed to see his ID for the margarita and reminded him that he would need to consume it on the premises. The man's eyes narrowed above his mask. He loudly protested about having to show his ID, insisting that he was clearly not a child. His voice boomed through the restaurant, causing several customers to turn and stare. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. I tried to explain that checking ID was our policy for all alcohol purchases, regardless of how old someone appeared to be. The man continued complaining for what felt like forever, holding up the entire line. Finally, with dramatic reluctance, he pulled out his ID and practically threw it at me. After verifying his age, I thought that was it. I told him his total came to $19.47. The man pulled out a crisp $100 bill and slapped it on the counter. Right next to the register, we have a clearly visible sign stating we cannot accept bills larger than $50 during lunch hours due to limited change. I apologized and pointed out that we couldn't accept $100 bills, directing his attention to the posted sign. The masked man exploded. He shouted that he didn't have any other form of payment and demanded that we just accept his $100 bill. My assistant manager, who was tall and muscular, quickly moved toward us after hearing the commotion. Meanwhile, a woman in line behind the man sighed loudly. She offered to help by trading 5 $20 bills for his 100 if that would solve the problem. The masked man grudgingly made the exchange with her, but his anger didn't subside. He continued to rant about our refusal to accept his money, calling it unbelievable that a business would reject legal tender. My assistant manager stepped between us, creating a buffer of safety that I desperately appreciated. He tried to explain that it wasn't my fault personally, but rather a company policy designed to ensure we had enough change for all customers during our busiest hours. This explanation only seemed to fuel his rage. By now, my manager, a tall woman with a no-nonsense attitude, approached the situation. She told the man to lower his voice and explained that his margarita would take a few minutes to prepare. She asked him to step aside so we could help other customers. The man refused to be pacified, demanding his drink immediately. He then escalated by threatening that he could easily make the day worse for everyone involved. The restaurant fell uncomfortably quiet with other customers shifting awkwardly. Meanwhile, I began helping the kind woman who had traded bills with him. She reassured me not to worry about the situation and expressed hope that my shift would improve. I thanked her sincerely. As I served other customers, the masked man continued his tirade, bizarrely claiming superiority because he was from the inner city while accusing us of being suburban kids who didn't know anything about the real world. My co-worker, who was also helping at the counter, attempted to reason with him. He gently pointed out that we were simply following the rules and that there was no need for threats. The masked man ignored him and started complaining to another customer about his alleged unfair treatment. That customer simply nodded without engaging, clearly uncomfortable. Then through the front windows I spotted a police car pulling into our parking lot. At first I assumed it was just officers coming in for lunch. They regularly ate at our restaurant, but my manager walked outside to meet them, and the masked man's eyes widened. The man erupted again, shouting incredulously about the police being called on him just for trying to use $100 bill. His shouting intensified as the officers entered and my manager explained the situation. They took the masked man aside to hear his version of events, while my manager went to the back to review surveillance footage with another officer. My coworker continued trying to defuse the situation. He explained that threatening staff was inappropriate and that we were simply doing our jobs. The man ignored this reasoning and demanded to know the whereabouts of his patron Margarita, reminding everyone that he had paid for it. After a few more minutes of discussion with the police, the masked man suddenly decided he didn't want to deal with what he called this nonsense anymore. Apparently realizing he could face charges for trespassing and disorderly conduct, he stormed out of the restaurant, still muttering about the terrible service. Whether he ever got his margarita remains a mystery to me. I was too busy apologizing to the dozen customers who had witnessed the entire spectacle. When my shift finally ended, my manager patted my shoulder and said I'd handled the situation well. She banned the masked man from returning to our location and gave me an extra break the next day to make up for the stress. The woman who had helped with the bill exchange came back later that afternoon and left me a $20 tip with a note that said, "For dealing with that nightmare with such grace." I've been dealing with chronic health issues since I was a teenager. Some days I just can't physically make it to a workplace, but my brain works fine. When I interviewed at this massive corporation 5 years ago, I was completely upfront about my situation. During my interview, I explained that I have a disability that sometimes makes it difficult to commute, but I can still work from my computer at home on those days. My soon-to-be manager nodded sympathetically and told me that they provide laptops to all employees, so working remotely shouldn't be an issue when necessary. I was thrilled. Finally, a company that understood modern work flexibility. I accepted the job doing business administration, which was 100% computer-based work that could be done from anywhere with an internet connection. Everything went smoothly for the first couple of months. Then one morning, I woke up with severe pain that made driving impossible, but I could still sit at my home desk. I called my manager to let them know I was having a flare-up and couldn't drive safely, but was set up at home and ready to work. My manager told me that if I was too sick to come in, I needed to take a sick day. I tried to explain that I wasn't too sick to work, just unable to physically drive to the office, and that all my work was on the laptop so I could attend meetings virtually. My manager insisted that wasn't how things worked there. They said either I was well enough to come to the office or I was sick and needed time off. There was no in-between. I attempted to explain again that the company gives everyone laptops specifically so we can work from different locations. My manager responded that those were for business trips and on-site client visits, not for working from home because I didn't feel like coming in. I tried to clarify that it wasn't that I didn't feel like coming in, but my manager cut me off. They stated that if I was logging in from home, I was claiming I could work, and if I could work, I could come to the office. If I couldn't come to the office, I was sick and needed to use sick leave. They demanded to know which it was. I gave up arguing and logged in anyway, to at least set my out-of-office message and reschedule my virtual meetings. Within minutes, my phone rang. My manager said they could see I was logged in and told me I needed to either drive in now or log off and take sick leave. I took the sick day even though I knew it would eventually cost me money. The company only provided a limited number of paid sick days per year, subsidized by the government, and after that, any sick time was unpaid. This pattern continued for 2 years. I went to Human Resources, Senior Management, even provided doctor's notes explaining that I could work remotely during flare-ups, but everyone deferred to my manager's discretion. I kept careful records of every instance and all communication, hoping someday it would matter. Then COVID hit. Suddenly, the entire company was ordered to work from home. No exceptions. I received the company-wide email and immediately called my manager. I mentioned that I had just gotten the work from home directive and wanted to clarify something. My manager confirmed that everyone needed to work remotely starting the next day. I pointed out how interesting this was, considering I had dozens of emails from them stating I was never allowed to work from home. I reminded them they had specifically told me that if I couldn't physically come to the office, I wasn't permitted to work. My manager tried to explain this was different because it was a company mandate during a health crisis. I asked if my health crisis wasn't important enough and told them I would need this policy change in writing, specifically addressing why my previous requests were denied, but now it was suddenly possible. My manager told me not to be difficult and to just follow the directive like everyone else. I told them I would be taking sick leave, as I'd been instructed to do whenever I couldn't come to the office. I didn't log in the next day or the day after. My partner was in her third trimester, and I was happy to have the unexpected time to help her prepare for our baby. After a week, my manager called, clearly agitated. They demanded to know why I hadn't been working and told me I needed to log in remotely. I reminded them that, as they had stated repeatedly over the past 2 years, if I couldn't come to the office, I must take sick leave, and I was following their policy. My manager claimed that policy didn't apply now since everyone was working from home. I told them I needed that in writing, along with an explanation of why this applied now but didn't when I requested it for my disability. My paid sick leave ran out after a few weeks. I provided a doctor's note stating I was fully fit to work, but reminded them that, according to their own policy, I couldn't work if I couldn't come to the office. They were stuck between admitting their discrimination or continuing to pay me while I didn't work. They chose a third option. They stopped paying me altogether. That's when I filed the lawsuit. They tried ignoring it at first, so I submitted a formal request for all records about me. This revealed emails between my managers and Human Resources discussing how to fire me without legal consequences. It was clear they knew they were in the wrong. When we finally got before a judge, their lawyers looked physically uncomfortable presenting their case. Before the hearing concluded, they offered a settlement covering my lost wages. I declined. The next offer doubled the amount and included written permission to work from home at my discretion indefinitely, even after the pandemic ended. I accepted, but not before ensuring the agreement acknowledged their previous policy had been discriminatory. My manager was reassigned to another department the following month. I still work there, mostly from home, and have never had another sick day deducted unfairly. I'm in my third year of college, sharing a house with 3 other students. Our next-door neighbors are 5 guys crammed into a much smaller house. We've been friends since freshman year, always trying to one-up each other with pranks. Last Tuesday, I had a rough shift at the coffee shop where I work part-time. All I wanted was to get home, sink into my beanbag chair, and decompress. When I opened the front door, the living room was empty. Our 4 couches, coffee tables, and even my prized beanbag chair had vanished. I heard laughter outside and saw our neighbors carrying my beanbag chair across the lawn. I stormed out and demanded to know what they were doing. They nervously explained they thought no one was home and insisted it was just a prank, not theft. I told them I'd had the worst day and just wanted my beanbag back. When they tried to convince me to let it go, I tackled the guy holding my beanbag. I wrestled it away and told them they could return the rest tomorrow. The next morning, my roommates and I discussed retaliation plans, from filling their bathroom with Jell-O to wrapping their possessions in foil. Then something occurred to me. Our house was much bigger than theirs. Where did they put all our furniture? I suggested we wait and see how things played out. 2 days later, we visited them. Their small house was completely overtaken by our furniture. Couches were stacked on couches. Coffee tables blocked doorways. The dining table occupied their main walkway. They begged us to take our stuff back. One admitted he'd slept on our dining table because he couldn't reach his bedroom. I mockingly asked if they weren't having fun with their prank. They admitted defeat, confessing it was a terrible idea. I pretended we were busy and might come tomorrow or the day after. The look of horror on their faces was so satisfying. After watching them suffer for another 10 minutes, we finally helped move everything back. When we carried the last coffee table home, their ringleader conceded our approach was fair. Waiting them out instead of retaliating was smart. I advised him that next time they should think about where they're going to put stolen furniture before taking it.